good anniversary to AkiDwA and to the great work that AkiDwA has been doing over 20 years. As a matter of fact, we did come together this year on one event already, because we're also celebrating our 20th anniversary here in Ireland. We're celebrating our 70th anniversary of IOM globally, but it also happens that we're celebrating our 20th anniversary here in Ireland. Very quickly, I wanted to introduce myself and apologize if I'm sometimes a bit out of breath. I'm actually finishing in the last phase of my pregnancy right now, so I am out of breath most of the time, so apologies for that. But my name is Lalini Veerassamy. I am, as Tendai said, the Chief of Mission of IOM in Ireland, and I'll have the chance to introduce a bit IOM's work very briefly in a few minutes. My background is I'm a member of the Quebec Bar Association, so I'm a lawyer of having completed my law degree and the bar, but then I quickly jumped into the international world with working for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, the International Labour Organization for a few years, and then started in Senegal, in Dakar, with the International Organization for Migration, and I've been working with IOM for now 13 years. Pretty much focused on the African continent, I must admit. So I come with that perspective, and I hope I can share and inspire you with some of the experience I've had in the field. And it's been over a year and a half now that I've been appointed in Ireland as the Chief of Mission. So it's also a very interesting experience for me to be pretty much on the side of a country of destination and understanding also the dynamics happening in a country of destination, especially in Europe. So thank you again for joining today. And Alana, if you wouldn't mind putting up the presentation that I prepared for you. Thank you. Thank you, Alana. If you can move to the other slide, the next slide. So what I wanted to discuss on this very important issue of feminization of migration, and we can go into the concept together and unpack it a bit, obviously very briefly on what we do and what is IOM, and then looking at the whole concept of feminization at a more global level, and some of the data which we managed to look at the national context and on the Irish context to maybe confirm some of the global trends that we see. And then I wanted to maybe touch upon two things. The fact that today we are in a situation where we realize that we really have to focus on gender sensitive policies because of the specific vulnerabilities and risks that women migrant face when migrating. And I can give some really, I think, strong examples of even experiences that I've gone through and experienced from my former position in Djibouti, for example, in the Horn of Africa. And then looking at some of the interesting initiatives that would promote and really leverage on the contribution that women and women migrants can play in the development either of the country of destination, the host country, or back home as part of the diaspora community. So I'd like to look at that. And obviously I know Salome, AkiDwA has a lot to share. The first time I interacted with AkiDwA was through the Brain Gain initiative, which has been ongoing for a number of years. So I know a lot of things that are being done already here, but I wanted to share maybe some examples and initiatives that we've either piloted or that we've seen as really interesting examples in terms of diaspora engagement, but focusing on the women contribution at different levels. If you can move to the other slide, please. So for those who may not know as much about IOM or who may think that it's just an NGO here in Ireland, which sometimes I can't blame a lot of people, because we have been very focused on very specific programs and activities here and not necessarily presented ourselves as this UN Global Migration Agency. And I focus on the UN aspect because it's only been since 2016 that we've joined the United Nations as a formal related agency. Previously to that, and as you can see, we were set up in 1951. We were always an intergovernmental organization, but we remained, we didn't have that UN status, and we wanted to remain that operational organization until we realized also with time and the global dynamics and migration taking such an importance at global level, that it made sense that IOM becomes this formal UN migration agency in 2016. And that really links up at that time, if you recall, with all the discussions taking place at international level on the New York Declaration on migrants and refugees, where Ireland took the lead in co-chairing and co-drafting the New York Declaration, but also leading then to the adoption of the Global Compact in December 2018. So it's important to know, I think, because that's the leverage that we can play. That's the contribution that we can play with being in direct contact with our member states, and Ireland is a member state. We have over 173 member states, so we've grown exponentially also over time, where we have a big cohort of states discussing together in our council every year on different issues related to migration governance and priorities. Obviously, you know us as being quite operational in facilitating movements of people, and that's a core aspect of our work, where we've brought in refugees through the resettlement program here in collaboration with IRPP and UNHCR. We support people who want to go back home voluntarily and want to have a life back home. This is a key program here, but overall, globally, movement operation is a key aspect of our organization. But we have moved also over time in doing much more research, policy work, collecting data, bringing countries together and fostering dialogues and things of that sort. And this is very much enshrined in our constitution. And as I said, IOM Ireland has been established in 2001. And I must say, maybe since 2016, this is the time maybe where we have been, and since 2019, a bit more active in wanting to diversify activities, looking at other priorities than pretty much the movement only. And probably this is why you hear a bit more about us and wanting to present our work more globally with you all. So before I go into the concepts of feminization, I wanted to look at the different types of mobility with you, and Tendai did mention it, that women are coming into Europe for different reasons, with different profiles, backgrounds. I think it's important to take all these different types of mobility into consideration, because when you look at feminization of migration and the different trends, we realize that it really touches upon these different groups, from the internal movements, whether it's intra-European or internal within a country, whether it's a legal or irregular migration movement, whether it's for skills or low skilled, semi-skilled, or whether it's for studies, or people just moving for business purposes, and obviously family reunification as well. In all these different sectors or types of mobility, we realize that feminization of migration has had an impact on these different groups. And over to the next slide, please.
Sorry, Lalini.
That's okay.
Nope.
And from our perspective and from the concept that we take on board and we try to analyze in IOM, is that it's not a new aspect, it's not a new issue that female migrants or women migrants migrate. But the big difference that we see in the course of the different decades is that women are actually migrating alone, not within a household, but actually migrating as the main source of income, as the main household and migrating alone and taking that risk and taking that responsibility alone. So that makes it very different in a way, and really requires us to think about the opportunities, but also what are the challenges in that, in terms of, as I said, risks and vulnerabilities. And this is something that I've very much experienced, not just here, but in some regions of the continent, the African continent, where you actually see women migrants pretty much walking, migrating alone and leaving their families behind, leaving their young children behind, and wanting to be the main source of income for the family. And that's where we actually move towards that concept for us, is that feminization of migration today in such a context requires really gender targeted policies, to really look at, as I said, the challenges and respond to these risks and vulnerabilities, but also try to leverage on the contribution of women migrants. Next slide, please. So basically, when we talk about this new age of international migration, where it's pretty much the era of international or internal migration today, with such huge numbers of people being able to travel. Obviously, with COVID, we're seeing the dynamics a bit different, but this is the general trend that we've seen over the past decades, is that there's an increase of transportation, lower costs, and this has also led to and demographics as well, from that perspective of aging population in some regions of the world to a younger population in some other regions, and looking for employment. So these push and pull factors that lead to increased movements and migration. But if you look at the global demographics, where most countries have this ratio of 40-50 or 45-50, 55% of men and women within a population, it's pretty much the same trend that you see international migration. It's definitely doubled from the 1960s to 2015, and this is the data that we have today. Around 46 to 48% are women migrants, but these are data, and these data can definitely be challenged, be discussed, but it's pretty much around the trend that we see. It's pretty much 50-50 in international migration, where there's a significant amount of women migrants, again, migrating either within a household or migrating alone. And that includes, when I say women, it includes also young girls. Tendai referred to unaccompanied minors. We also see an interesting trend of not just young boys migrating, but young girls as well, taking the risk to migrate. And I've experienced that also with the whole issue of street children in the Horn of Africa as well. This, if we refer to the types of mobility, this looks at not just migrant workers, which is a huge cohort of population. People are ultimately wanting to move for economic reasons, with other vulnerabilities, other reasons, but the main factors is usually economic vulnerabilities, economic vulnerabilities. But you also have students and refugees also, that you see these trends of women migrating as students and refugees as well alone. So that's an interesting trend and dynamic that we're seeing. In the context of the next slide, thanks, Salome. The context of Ireland, I quickly put up a few figures. Obviously, maybe they're not the only ones, but I find it interesting to see that it's fairly much the same trend in Ireland, and I'm sure it's the same in other European countries. But if you look at the trends, so the three, so from 2014 to 2020, 2014 had already an important group of migrant women coming into Ireland. But if you look at the trends from the UK, pretty much hasn't changed. And EU, the rest of EU or EU now and rest of the world has increased. not significantly per se, but has increased. So that shows also an interesting, again, trend into Ireland. These are obviously data from the Central Statistics Office. And it's not always easy to capture data on migrants, as you know. So these are probably estimates. The next slide is about the non-Irish documented migrant women working in key sectors. I took some data from 2018. Obviously, it doesn't include the undocumented, which is something that we could be discussing about. But if you look at the documented migrant workers with the work permits, with a formal work permit, this is the usual trend that you see a lot of women in the human health and social work, or human and social services sector. So that's the last or the first from bottom to top, with big proportion of female migrants in respect of, in comparison also with all the other migrant workers in that sector. Same for the accommodation and food services, pretty much 50%. And then the education also is quite high. Whereas in some other sectors, maybe manufacturing, construction might be less. But wholesale is also very important as well. But these are the trends that you would see globally. It's not something different. You would put in domestic workers maybe somewhere at the first sector as well, because that's obviously, as you know, a huge number of domestic workers or care workers would fall under, would be migrant women in a lot of countries today. Very quickly, and I wanted to put out, this doesn't come from us. These are definitely things that we took out from ICI, from a few different studies, but it also depicts the fact that what I was saying before is that gender sensitive policies are needed, because we do realize, even in a context like Ireland, that some NGOs, some key interlocutors here have pointed out the risks associated with specifically migrant women and challenges that they face, including exploitation, abuse, isolation, underemployment, lower wages in specific sectors compared to men or Irish nationals. So these are things that you would see again, not just here but everywhere, again, which makes you think that definitely we need to be targeting and thinking about specific policies that help and encourage women to better integrate at the level of a host country. But regardless of that, it also shows with time that migrant women has been processes at political, social, economic level. And I mean, Salome is one example, for example. So there's also a lot of policies, a lot of practices and opportunities where women migrant can also grow in a specific context. The next slide is something we really work on it, obviously, in IOM, and we have some quite interesting data to share. And if you take just a specific context like not just gender-based violence, but also human trafficking in persons, there's interesting trends that come out of it. We have this database in IOM, around 110,000 cases that we've assisted globally over time. And if you look at this database, 46% of victims of trafficking are women. And 50% of the cases that we also assisted over time of the means and the cause of trafficking was sexual exploitation. Obviously with a big cohort of women there, but also men as well. That 50% was, it's a data coming from 2018, but if you look at it a few years back, that data of sexual exploitation compared to labor exploitation was around 79 to 80%. So it's gone down, where it also shows that there's also a bigger cohort now of people and women being victims of trafficking in the context of labor and work. And a lot of these cases are very young girls, young women under the age of 26. That's from the profiles we got from that 108,000 cases that we've assisted over time. So that also shows the risks associated with women migrating and being at risk of being trafficked. And that's pretty much been pointed out by some of the research I've read here from the SCRP, the Sexual Exploitation Research Program, and so forth. In a country of that, so that was mainly talking about migrants transiting or en route in French, but it's pretty much the same in a country of destination where we've seen these trends of de-skilling, underemployment. Again, a lot of the female migrants that we see globally have been working in the domestic sector, and in very specific regions of the world, Middle Eastern countries. We know that there's a huge trend of domestic workers or women migrants. And some of the vulnerabilities that we've seen related to wages, working long hours, and passport retentions and so forth. Again, if I'm sure maybe someone will raise that question to me, well, that might not be different for men also being at risk in the context of exploitation and trafficking, and that's true. But there are more risks associated with women migrants in that aspect. If I share with you just the data from, which I didn't put here, but there was this research done by UNDP and ILO and IOM, sorry, in 2008, which dates back, but it's still quite interesting. Out of 145 domestic workers from Sri Lanka working in the Arab states, 17% had been sexually harassed and 5% been raped. So the trends and the challenges are much bigger, I'd say, for women migrants in specific contexts, obviously, in specific country and regions. Next slide, please. Now, I wanted to maybe zoom into the issue of women migration into the Horn of Africa, because that's something that I've experienced. I know quite a lot. I've supported a lot of these women walking, as I said, and migrating alone. And when I say walking, they're literally walking with a single bottle of water, sometimes empty bottle of water, and trying to reach from Ethiopia, crossing Djibouti, and going through war-torn Yemen up to Saudi Arabia to find employment as domestic workers. We researched a lot on that, and recently a study came out, which I had started a few years back, and now it's been published this year, which is great, but showed around 20% of the migrants crossing through were women. And I've had the chance to meet with some of these women, and it's just terrible, some of the experience that they go through. And if you look at the next picture on the next slide, I wanted to share that with you. Seems like a simple picture of women, and you don't see, it's one of the pictures that I took, so it's probably not the best pictures, but this was in one of the oddest places in Djibouti, where it's an area where smugglers bring the migrants, make them wait in transit, and then they continue their way up to Yemen and take the boat there. But a lot of, in this cohort, you would see this mixed migration flows where you have a mixture of women, men, girls, boys, and sometimes asylum seekers as well, not just economic migrants, and walking and being together in one single group. A lot of women. And if you see that picture where I was there and I talked to some of these women, if you look at the women at the back, they're actually just literally sitting and waiting, and at the same time this woman is plaiting the hair of this other lady, waiting to go, and being very, very aware of the risks and the risk that they will face, or that they have faced already within that migration cycle. So from leaving Ethiopia, transiting into Djibouti, and perhaps maybe sexually harassed or raped, arriving in Yemen and being tortured there, and then arriving in Saudi Arabia, where they've heard of horrendous stories, but still ready to go and take the risk of that route and that experience. It's difficult to understand. It makes you also think of what the concept of vulnerability means for different groups of populations, because again, and the resilience, because again, if you look at this picture, and I remember being there and I looked at that, I said, well, these women have a very strong resilience capacity, much more than myself, and being able to take that path alone, leaving their kids behind, and knowing the risks and taking it for a specific objective is to make money and send back home, obviously. The next slide, please. I'm almost done. I don't want to take too much time as well, and focus on some questions and answers. The last slides that I wanted to mention, obviously, with all this aspect of risks and vulnerabilities, I also wanted to commend the contribution of women migrants into development. And this is something that we've worked a lot on. We've tried to pilot projects. We've tried to understand what is the real contribution, how it can be assessed through different ways of women within the diaspora community contributing from the traditional financial remittances, but to the social capital, the social contribution of women into either the host community, as I said, or back home. And we're currently finalizing a small research we're doing with some communities here in Ireland, including the Kenyan communities, and we realize pretty much the same trend, that there's a lot of the increased and more regular remittance flows is within migrant women. So they send more money, sometimes even 50% of their income, and they also send it much more regularly. And that also obviously helps back home in the basic needs, but also education of families left back home. Obviously, contribution to specific labor force cannot be forgotten. If you look at some sectors today in some countries, not just domestic care workers, but other sectors where they play a huge contribution to these economic sectors. And that's something that we should realize. IOM has developed a lot of programs in the area of how to engage with diaspora from, as I said, the pure remittance point of view to the direct investment, how we can leverage and facilitate and empower diaspora to invest back home through direct investment, but also through return of their talents and skills, but also through other means, for example, philanthropic activities and so forth. And I wanted to share maybe just 2 quick videos, if you allow, on the contribution of this lady called Marina, who's from Cameroon and lives in the Netherlands, and set up this Netherlands Africa Business Council, but also another movie of a few minutes on the contribution of a Somali living in Italy, who went back to Mogadishu and actually has contributed enormously in fighting against infant mortality and helping in a very difficult context like Mogadishu. We had a very interesting project in the past funded by Italy called MIDA Women in West Africa, where I was involved a few years ago, and we really helped into supporting women in Europe, in different countries in Europe, to come back and receive financial support to invest and set up businesses. These types of projects there's lots of them, I know, and I know even in the context of Ireland, probably lots of initiatives of that sort. But I really wanted to point out that should we be able to come together and have proper policies and financial means to encourage these types of contribution, I think with, again, the profile and the trends that we're seeing among migrant women in contributing and supporting more communities back home, we could leverage a lot on that into the development of some countries. I had this last data that I wanted to share with you, which I'll find eventually, but yeah, for example, in Nepal, 50% of the migrants' remittances comes from women, and 20% of the GDP comes from the contribution of remittances from migrant women. Nepalese workers abroad. That's very significant. Comoros is the same thing, for example, where I was working before. So I'll stop here and I'll maybe just play these two very short videos and over then to Tendai and Salome. Thank you.
Tell us why we are here today and what we are expecting.
Well, given the number of people, we are here to facilitate the connection between different actors active in the private sector, the public sector, the non-governmental sector, to increase the number of partnerships in order to make sure that Africa keeps working.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. As the main theme of your conference also say, Africa works. And you say that connecting these partners will ensure that Africa works. Can you explain us why this philosophy is so important?
Well, if opportunities are not created to facilitate meetings between people, I mean, there are a lot of people here who will not get the chance to meet easily in the daily life. And I believe this type of conference is organized to facilitate these connections and enable these people and also strengthen and empower them in what they want to achieve with regards to cooperation with Africa.
Yeah, it's a really good message. Do you have last words for people who are watching us at home or for the participants of this conference? What's your last main message when it comes to Africa and your message?
Well, I would say Africa works in one word. You need Africa. Africa needs you. Be part of the history. Don't miss the boat.
Is there a second one? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
loo qabo takhasuskayga iyo aqoontayda wax gaaray ka jirto sidaa dareed ayaan rabay inaan ugu soo noqdo aan u helo opportunity aan kusoo noqdo dadka Dr. Ubax Baare Axmed waxaan ahay dhakhtarka caruurta waxaan ka imaaday wadanka Talyaaniga magaalada Roma waxaan hadda ka shaqeeyaa isbitaalka Naadir halka ugu weyn magaalada Muqdisho waa isbitaal public hospital ah dowladda leedahay isbitaal loogu gargaaro ummadda Soomaaliyeed oo dhan sidii hadda hal erey kuma qeexi karo meelaha meesha laga baahan tagaa caruurta laakiin hadda the main objective ka meesha waxay tahay meeshaas qabka qaban lahaa si ay u noqoleen meeshaas ay meel kaligeeda socodsiiso marka ka shaqeyn inaan tababar ku sameyn lahay ahaado skills ahaado coaching ahaado shaqooyin ahaado maalin walba wacyigelin iyo tababar sidaa oo doctrine aan u sameeyo si ay u noqdaan dad isku filan oo meesha shaqada ما حدا بشان markay xaalad degdeg ku jireen awal waxa lagu soo carabi jiray qaybta caruurta meeshiisa markuu hooyadiisa caloosh ka soo baxo in hadda 24 hours oo dhakhtar meesha joogo
I think we can stop there, Alana, because it seems as the sound isn't working too well.
Yeah, thanks, Lalini. I think we might just do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lalini, for the insightful contribution with regards to the feminization of migration. I think key issues there emerging from your presentation is how common the thread is that connects women across the globe, whether in global south, global north. Our experiences are very commonplace. They are the same at varying degrees and intensity depending on individual circumstances and obviously country context. But I suppose I think some of the key words that would have come from your presentation would be issues around, vulnerability versus resilience as an issue. And I think this resonates with anybody that has been here, whether woman or male, but particularly we, us as women migrants, we have been in this dichotomy, or there has been vulnerability on one end, and then there is, resilience and the expectation for us to be resilient in sometimes very challenging circumstances. But also there's also an issue of risks versus opportunities. And I think, with more than maybe 15 years or 20 years now experience of living here in Ireland, a lot of us now are looking for opportunities and looking to minimize the risk as much as is possible. But I think the challenges that we face in terms of getting, it could be economic opportunities, financial, opportunities, but also even work opportunities, leadership opportunities for most of us females. What is the role that IOM can play, in capacitation of institutions such as AkiDwA, but also women like Tina who are here? I know Tina played a significant role alongside AkiDwA and many other women, that would have tried to create platforms for integration for migrants here. But the sustainability of those initiatives and projects would have been challenged by the absence and the difficulty in mobilizing financial capital. And I think that's one of the major challenges. Whether you want to go out as a consultant to do something, how to sustain that is a bit of a challenge. So it'd be interesting to hear from you, in terms of what are some of the international best practices around, migrants that have migrated to the global north, and what are what is it that has been done that we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, but for us to be able to just learn from that perspective. But maybe before you respond to my question, I want to see if there's any other questions that are from the floor. If anybody has got a question or comment, then we can take 3 questions and then Lalini can respond, and then we can go to Salome after that. Is there anybody else? Hi, Tina, I can see you there. And I want to also acknowledge the presence of our male champions. It's always important for us to not only just talk among ourselves, more like preaching to the converted, but also to see men, Ejide, Logan and Farai, many other, men that have been standing with the projects of AkiDwA in order to make sure that at least our voices and female voices are actually amplified from that perspective. So I want to acknowledge the presence of even Irish NGOs, Irish Red Cross and Intercultural Center that I see here, and many others. We really appreciate your continued support to the agenda for amplifying the voices for migrants through AkiDwA and through other platforms as well. So maybe while Lalini is responding, can I also get some questions just being put up there? I know there's a question there around, are we going to be able to get the presentation on that? So maybe Salome, if you can if you can answer that question, maybe in your own presentation as well, how people are going to be able to get the presentation. Over to you, Lalini.
Yeah, I have a question then.
Okay, please go ahead.
I was raising my hand. I'm not sure if you saw.
I didn't see your hand. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Great job, Lalini. That was very, very insightful. You mentioned something there on the contribution of migrants to the economy. Was that for which country was that for? And do you have any data for Ireland?
Thank you very much for that, Nengi. Is there anybody else? Yeah, okay. So you can just respond to those 2 questions, please, and while we wait for other contributions as well. Thank you.
There's a
You are mute. You are mute. Please, can you start? Yeah. Can you try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
There is a background noise. Someone is muting me when I'm unmuting, so I'm not sure what's happening.
I'm trying to mute the background noise.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries. Thanks, Tendai, for that. And obviously, maybe just to come back on the role that IOM can take in empowering, engaging, and enabling. This is part of our 3E strategy with IOM for the past, I'd say, even 10 years now. We've developed credible projects and best practices over time, obviously looking at them also over time and assessing what has been the challenges and difficulties too. Because if you didn't look at the rest of that movie from that clip from the Somali doctor who came back, but one of the things that we were facing, for example, we had a really strong program with Sudan as well, but in sending and facilitating the return of skills and talent back into the public service, for example, in Sudan, I remember that. It did create some challenges also in the reintegration of these women migrants back into the public service, with sometimes increased salaries, increased incentives, which people who had not migrated would not access. So these types of projects with time also have evolved in trying to also fine tune them so that the reintegration also back home is also quite smoother in a way and in line with other priorities also in the country of origin. We have a lot of examples. I missed one of the last slide, which talked about Women for Development Academy, which was a project which we piloted in 2017 with around 11 African diaspora women association in Europe and in Belgium. I mean, it was funded by Belgium, but it targeted a few European countries, and that really helped in bringing these groups of women associations together to contribute back home. I mentioned Mida Women, that's been ongoing for over 10, 15 years now, where we've tried to really focus on the engagement of women migrants into some key sectors back home in setting up small businesses or helping in mentoring women back home in projects. When I was in Tunisia and North Africa, we set up this crowdfunding system with the support of a Qatari NGO, funding and mentoring and supporting also not just women, it was also men from the MENA region, from the North African region, to help in supporting small businesses back home. So there's so many different initiatives that I'd be more than happy to share with you. Obviously, we're not the only player in that area. There are a lot of diaspora groups, diaspora associations that have a lot to share, and we've worked with them. Because one thing also we realize, we come from that perspective of interacting with the member states, but the private sector or the diaspora associations have a lot to share, have a lot of experience. So if you merge both experience and skills together, it makes a better combination in a way, where we have that leverage with member states and maybe discussing about policy issues, accessing funds and things of that sort. But the private sector also comes with incredible ideas. When I talk about private sector, I'm talking about private interlocutors more than private sector in a way. This platform called the iDiaspora, which I can share the link with you also, is a nice platform for every one of you who are already involved and want to get more ideas, where we put in all forms of projects, initiatives on that iDiaspora platform. And these movies that I shared come from that platform, actually. Very quickly, and I'll respond then to Nengi's question, but one of the things that we were looking into, maybe kickstarting a few ideas with partners locally in Ireland, is that through that research that we're doing on remittances, it gives us a nice background and source of information to then propose a few recommendations. So, for example, we had this focus group meeting last week with the help of Salome as well, with the Kenyan diaspora, and we brought in the Embassy of Kenya. And then the next step is to have this research ready and then present it to maybe some development partners who would maybe want to support some of the recommendations of that report. So these are things that we can definitely do. even in the local context, which hopefully in the years to come will be a bit more involved. In terms of contribution to the economy, overall remittances, there's a lot of examples, Nengi, where remittances have contributes or still contribute to the economy. When COVID struck, the World Bank was warning a lot on the risks and the threatening rates of remittances going down because of COVID. But in some countries, and most of the trends have showed the contrary, and even the small research we did here showed that even actually during COVID, the support back home continued through remittances. So I give the example of Nepal, actually, to respond to your question, but there's lots of countries, even Comoros, where I've worked in 2011, 2012, is a huge contribution coming from women like Comorans living in France, in Marseille, supporting back home into projects back home is a huge portion of the GDP of the small island in Comoros. There's a few examples of that sort, which could be interesting to share. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that response. I've got two questions from Phyllis, and there's one in the chat. There was a question just with regards to whether we'll be able to get a presentation, and actually Salome responded saying yes, it will be available on YouTube. So if you can just read the comments that were made there by Salome with regards to the access to the video, which is really useful, and thanks to that. There's a question around, can you tell us more about the governance in IMO and how the welfare of migrants are handled? Following on to that from Lena, is that what IMO does for supporting women in direct provision. That's a specific question for women in direct provision. And also, does IMO follow up with migrants who are deported back to their countries? If maybe Phyllis can also ask her own question as well. And then I'll take the last one, and then you can respond them all at once. Over to you, Phyllis.
Hi, my name is Filiz. I'm from Turkey, and sorry, my English not very good. I came here 2 years ago. I am a student, English language student, and still I'm learning language. And I want to learn about NGO, IOM, and for example, how they can support women if we have some problem. For example, if we can't go back country, my country, because of domestic violence, and Turkey not good for women, and we have a lot of problem every day, and how they can help us, support us if I have problem.
Thank you, Phyllis, for that. Can I ask Pelagia to please ask your question, and then over to you, Lalini. Pelagia. You're mute, Pelagia. Please, if you can unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question or your contribution. Okay, while we're waiting for Pelagia to unmute, please you respond.
Hello?
Okay,
sorry.
over to you.
Sorry to this. Sorry, I didn't hear. My name is Pelagia Croy. I just want to thank Salome for this good initiative, because she always invites us, you know, to get informed about what is going on about women. I would like to thank as well Lalini about a brilliant presentation. Thank you. I was working for IOM as well for almost 1 year. It's not about a question, it's a preoccupation. I'm from a French-speaking country, from the Ivory Coast, and I believe that there's an important French community here, as I'm running as well a small group of women from, Francophone. I just want to know in which way we can, encourage those women to participate in those kind of debate or activity, because most of the Zoom meeting I attend, is few or maybe no French, woman participating at those meeting. And I know that sometimes you share information and the topic can help them to move ahead in their community or their activities. So in which way we can advise or give strategies or advice to boost them or to encourage them to participate? So this is my preoccupation. Thank you.
Thank you. Tendai, would you like me to answer the questions, or you want to take other last questions?
There's no other hand up actually, but just to thank everyone, and please can you just keep muted because there's background noise as well. So please go ahead, Nalin.
Thanks, Tendai. I'll maybe address questions on governance and what are we doing in DP centers and basically the governance framework is quite clear. We're an intergovernmental organization. We have states that are members. Some of them are still observers and not full members, but we still provide the same services to them. I'm thinking of a lot of Middle Eastern countries who are not yet members of IOM. Russia recently joined, for example, 2-3 weeks ago. And then we have a set of NGOs and international NGOs that do request to be part of IOM's council as observers. And we have obviously mandatory contributions coming from, similar to other UN agencies, coming from our member states, and voluntary contribution coming from key states and regions, but also private sector funding is increasing also more and more. But the main source of funding, I'd say, would come from the European Union, from the USA, and from Japan. And obviously then other source of funding. Irish Aid also funds very significantly to our budgets and programs and projects. One of them being recently setting up a global media migration academy to fight against disinformation and misinformation on migration and migrants. So I hope I've answered that question of governance. Maybe it was more specific, and I'd be more than happy to respond to that question again. What do we do in DP centers specifically with women? And I see my colleague Ajid is here, and he's the one who's in charge of outreach into DP centers, and he's done a lot of work to reach out to DP centers and explaining what we can do. Obviously, our services are quite limited in what we actually offer for now, has been mainly focused on those who want to discontinue with their application and return back home. This is something that we offer. But also we've gone in expanding some of the services that we can offer, sometimes just without much financial support, where we've gone into supporting some DP centers and DP managers in understanding what mental health is all about, what gender-based violence is all about, and how to detect cases and refer. So we've looked at some of these issues recently, and we'll be doing even more in that context. Our cohort is not usually the asylum seekers, because that falls under the mandate of UNHCR and also the government itself and NGOs working here. But we do come in, obviously, in supporting and complementing these services and these NGOs already providing a lot here. Right now, we have a project which has been funded by the Department of Justice and is looking at how we can develop the concept of cultural mediators, focusing on the most vulnerable migrants, GBV survivors and victims of trafficking, and working with public service providers and private service providers to really be more sensitive on how to approach cases of GBV and trafficking in persons, with a huge focus on women. So that's something that we're doing right now, and that we'll hopefully be able to share more. But the idea is to also have cultural mediators in the future, working with IOM, working with public services who could be those mediators and help in facilitating dialogue and helping and assisting the most vulnerable women, especially within the DP settings. what do we do for deported migrants or women migrants? We have a strong policy in IOM where we try to advocate with government and our member states that deportation is not the solution. This is where the AVRR, the Assisted Voluntary Program, started 30, 40 years ago. But with time, we've also realized that if we don't provide support for those who have gone back home and have nothing back home and have been deported, that's also a gap in the services that we can provide to migrants and countries. So we do have some countries where we provide, when the movement has taken place, we don't want to be involved in the movement per se of forced return, because we're quite against that policy. But once these migrants have returned home, this is where we are there to assist in their reintegration back home. I was particularly in the Horn of Africa, we had a lot of returns from Saudi Arabia, where Saudi Arabia was deporting a lot of Ethiopian migrants, a lot of women migrants. And when they had already returned back to Addis, then we took over and getting some financial support to have them in their reintegration back home. A lot of mental issues, a lot of trauma from that experience, and this is where we took over. How can we support, Phyllis, how can we support women I think that links up to what my answer, we have limited services here for now, I must admit, but this is something that we want to expand on, especially in the mental health and psychosocial services. For now, it's really limited to these projects that I've mentioned. And I think whatever project we do develop in the future, we really don't want to step on the toes of NGOs that are doing a lot of work already. So it will be either capacitating NGOs or complementing some of the work that NGOs do. And that's been quite clear in the country strategy that we launched recently. I know I haven't answered your question per se, but going forward, we definitely want to use that approach. And if you feel you have any specific needs, we'll definitely be ready to talk to you separately, bilaterally. As I said, Ejid is here on the call, and he is the one who takes care of these matters as well. The French community, again, I refer to Ejid because he's also from the DRC, and I'm also from a country which speaks French. So obviously I'm very sensitive to that, Pelagie, and we had this concept, maybe that responds partly to your question. We developed this concept of migrant ambassadors recently, where we've identified key people within the community or specific communities to help us reach out to others within their community and try to empower them and respond to some of their needs. So I would respond maybe to that to you in saying, well, if you want to boost and promote and empower more French speakers or Francophone or of French background to come forward and share their contribution, their insights, this is something that we can help you on through the Migrant Hub with the support of Ejid, and we've done that with a few communities already. And we are French speakers here, so that's probably going to be enough. So happy to further discuss with you also bilaterally on what we can do together. Thank you.
I will give Ejid rights, who's been quite instrumental in helping migrant women and compiling reports on racism and all challenges that women do face in a new host country. And we want to thank you for your continued support. I know that Glen Cree Intercultural Center was here as well, but they've just left. So thank you very much for the multiple stakeholders that are doing the best that they can to support the efforts for integration, and particularly to support women as they try to integrate. Over to you, Ejid. Don't know if you're ready.
Hello, thanks very much, Tendai. It's a pleasure to see you again. And thanks very much, Lalini, for the presentation. I think Lalini responded to the question, honestly. But in terms of the support that we provide to women in direct provision, In my team, I have 2 women actually who travel with me to direct provision centers. And my approach is always really to work with people. It's not just we explaining about the services that we provide. If you have needs and initiatives that you think we can support you on, and I always say to the migrants that it's always very open, and we can work together on that. We do run different information days, for example, and this is open to everybody, but we are very much open to run services only for women as well. At the moment, for example, we have Kuda, who is also in my team, who is very much assigned to work on case of vulnerability, including issues of gender. So if women, you have particular issues, you need really support from us, it's really all open. In terms of French women, as Lalini said, we have a hub in IOM, and this is something that really Lalini is very keen to that in terms of supporting and bringing migrants to our premises. Whenever the situation comes back to normal, we don't have a big room, but it's very, very much open. If it's women speaking French or women with particular issues, you want to develop the space and also the support of IOM, please do not hesitate to contact me. I just put my email address there, and we can support you as much as we could. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ejid, working there with IOM and working with Lalini, and thank you very much for your contributions all the way from DRC, but based here in Ireland. So thank you very much for that. And I want to thank Pelagie as well, because she's already offered her services, you know, and she wants to be able to do a lot more, both to IOM, but also to AkiDwA. Particularly with regards to translation and the French community in general. So we welcome this platform because that's the purpose of this platform. The platform is created to create synergies, to establish a cross-cultural and multi-stakeholder engagement and collaboration. And this is maybe the genesis of it all, is we want to be able to celebrate and to protect this platform. So thanks very much to Lalini for your insightful contribution with regards to the work of IOM. And maybe my challenge to IOM is that while we are still, you know, grappling with the whole issue of vulnerability as the first generation of migrants, we are quite highly skilled. We come from, you know, diverse countries with a lot of experience and with a lot of really good qualifications, and we are not inherently vulnerable, as you will know this. And it is my expectation, and I know I speak on behalf of many people, that you continue to do whatever you can to ensure that you strengthen the collaboration and participation of migrant women that are here in Ireland. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, because the work has been done in other countries, and we don't necessarily have to continue doing exactly the same thing that's been done. This is post-COVID times. It has been given an opportunity for us to be able to innovate and retool ourselves and course correct on things that have not been done well elsewhere. And I think we can start with Ireland, and I think IOM can do a lot more, you know, in terms of working closely and capacitation of institutions like AkiDwA, women like Pelagie, and many others as well for this. And I also want to acknowledge the work and the role of Irish agencies that are here that continue to work in collaboration with AkiDwA and migrant women in general. You know, the fight continues, but we appreciate the support that is coming from all stakeholders. So I want to take this opportunity to introduce a lady that I first met as just a Salome, you know, young and really trying to just find her feet in here in Ireland, more than 20 years ago. And I remember when she started AkiDwA with her friends, I remember meeting them, and they were actually writing on a piece of paper. At that time, there were no iPads at the time. So she was just writing down, and I walked up to them and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "We're starting an organization. We'll tell you once it's finalized." And now here we are. We have a dynamic institution that is creating these global platforms with women and men from diverse backgrounds. And it's just really encouraging to see, the work that has been done by AkiDwA so far. Not only has Salome evolved from just being a Salome, but she's now a doctor as well. She also stood for elections last year, and she wanted to be a senator, and that was really good. She's represented us on the, you know, as a commissioner on human rights and many other platforms. So, and now she's the chief of AkiDwA as well. So I want to just really welcome Salome and ask you to give us your final remarks on today's session and the plan for the future masterclasses going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tendai. And I think you know, the masterclasses, Alana will put them up. But just first of all, to thank Lalini. I think we've been hustling her, you know, since she came to Ireland, because really she's very instrumental in helping us understand about migration, but also as a woman who have gone through quite a lot in terms of you know, her position where she is now. You know, she can share a lot of wisdom, and we are very, very happy to have you, Lalini. We actually would want to continue to work with you as AkiDwA, and we hope to do more, you know, in future with IOM as well. So thank you so much. Also to thank you, Tendai. Yes, we were young girls when we met. 20 years later, you know, we are still there and doing good. And I would say that, you know, the story of AkiDwA, and you had it 2 weeks ago, because we had it actually also recorded, so you can actually follow up on what I said in that recording. The session today goes very well with what I spoke last time and what is on record now that you can listen. So we are very grateful to move ahead with these master classes. Also to thank a lot of people who are here, including Tina. Tina was a chair of AkiDwA at the time, and you would have actually seen a lot of her photos when Alana started showing those photos at the very beginning and where we have come from. So I see Tina. I also see Professor Phil. She's the assistant professor in Trinity College, the new actually Black Studies, I think, department in Trinity. So it's great to have her here. I also saw Islamia from Galway. So we have many people and many people who have supported AkiDwA in so many ways, you know, from the very founding times and up to now. And we hope people will learn actually, and we read it, like maybe to have a reflection of where we have come from, but also to think of where we are heading to. And like Lalini has said, you know, we've learned about the feminization of migration, and we know very sure, like I said last week, you know, to migrate is an individual choice. You know, the causes that goes with it is because you make that choice. It can also be very empowering, but also very disempowering. And we've had, for example, for women who have been trafficked or women who have ended up here with the gender-specific countries or who have experienced gender-specific harm, that they can be supported to be able to, you know, support themselves and their families. You know, we've heard about the maintenances, and actually with a meeting with Lalini last week, we heard very clearly that, you know, women are sending, you know, money regularly. They are doing very far much better than men. They are the backbone of the society. Actually, I heard somebody else saying last week that we don't use backbone anymore. We say oxygen. They are the oxygen of the society. So they are actually driving, they're transforming Ireland because they are contributing to taxes here, for example. But at the same time, they are also contributing to their home countries of origin. And this is very significant. Women are also now owners of property. They own things imagined in their life, you know, because they are making finances and money out of the jobs that they do, that they don't get things for granted or for free, but they are making them the money that they make or any wealth that they make by working hard. So it's very important that women are supported in a very meaningful way, and those who need to be supported in terms of psychosocial support and also, you know, any other support that they may need, that support is provided there. So we are at 20 years in AkiDwA. We have so many things that we have planned. You know, we had very big ideas of how we'll be going around the country, but we are going through the country actually through the social media now, you know, on the Zoom or in Teams. So we hope to continue doing more than we have done up to now. We are engaging with policymakers, like I said last week. We are meeting with several ministers and TDs, influential people, including secretary generals from different departments. And so these meetings will continue throughout the year. And we really want to engage with them, sharing with them what you're calling the wisdom of AkiDwA, on where we have come from, also what we see as gaps. And our major concern as an organization is actually the second generation of migrants, the need for this specific kind of group to be helped. You know, the second generation, mainly children who are born here, but those who came as young kids when we were coming as the first generation of migrants. So we are hoping that, you know, the state will listen to us and really do something for the second generation, but as well facilitate us who are already here to live a meaningful life. We know it's still very difficult for people who are actually living in direct provision centers, you know, accessing, you know, driving license, for example, accessing employment for all of us, accessing, you know, even to open a bank account, which is now a little bit opening. So there are a lot of inequalities and injustice out there. And that's why AkiDwA purpose, both the mission and vision of the organization is still very, very relevant. And every time we do evaluation and review for the organization, we are told we are still very relevant. So we hope to continue to be relevant, you know, for everybody and the future generations. We also have people like Nengi who asked questions earlier, who we actually want to leave the legacy, you know, with them, that they can take up the work of the organization and take it to the next level. So I'll leave it there because I know we had said before previously that we'll be having only 1 hour for the masterclasses, but I think now we'll extend it to 1.5 hours because 1 hour is quite ambitious when we have people wanting to ask questions and that kind of thing. I think Arana can play the list of the upcoming masterclasses. We were actually talking about not changing the link so that if you attended this masterclass, she'll just send the link to you and remind you what is happening and what is coming up, and that people can join, you know, without having to have new links every time. But we'll communicate with you about that. But again, I want to thank everybody, all the support that you've given us. People like Rogan, you know, I wish we can have a few more men, because when we advertise for our activities, we do not actually just restrict them to women. But you find that, you know, majority of the people who are coming are the women. We also need men, because for us to be able to achieve our mission and mission, sometimes women are saying that they have to negotiate with men. So thanks everybody, please help us to grow. If there's anything that you can do, whether it's a word of wisdom, please let us know.
Thank you very much, Salome, for this. I'm seeing a lot of comments as well of people that are saying they can offer French classes and Spanish classes, and really this has been a networking platform. Thanks to Salome, thanks to AkiDwA for this, and thanks to Lalini as well. She's in a final stage of her last trimester, and she's still managed to do this for us. So we wish you all the best, you know, in your maternal endeavors. I wish you all the best in that. So thank you very much. So this brings us to the end of this second masterclass for AkiDwA. The third one, as you can see, is intersectional feminization, why we need to help each other. That's the next one, and that's on Thursday the 13th of May, 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And please check out and please subscribe to AkiDwA on YouTube, and we thank you very much for that. And thanks to everyone. Thanks, Onya. I can see Onya is here as well. Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone, and all the best, and see you again next time at the next masterclass. Thanks to AkiDwA. Have a very good evening until we meet again later on in the month. Thank you.